Hey everybody, and welcome back. So a couple of months ago, I made a video that went viral on TikTok all about this camera, Lomography's simple use film camera. Now in that video, I talked a lot about how I thought this camera was a really great alternative to using disposable cameras. A lot of people nowadays use disposable cameras, really popular and easy, and a very kind of stress-free way to get into film or take film photos as an average consumer and not think too hard about it. Especially for people who like the aesthetic of film but don't really, want to get too serious in the medium, disposables are a great way to do that. My only problem with disposables though is that they're cost ineffective because you have to buy a new one every single time, and that means you're practically paying for just a roll of film because you're throwing the camera away, and that's like a $15 roll of film every time, which is really stupid, and they're bad for the environment. So I pose this camera as a really good alternative because it looks and functions and is built like a disposable, but it's able to be reloaded. Now, unfortunately, TikToks are only a minute long, and in that video, I kind of just briefly talked about this camera, but I really wanted to make a full video on here about it because this is the camera that got me started into film, which sounds crazy because it's just a little disposable type camera, but I used this camera exclusively for a whole entire year while I was living in a different country, and it was really fun and a really great way for me to use film. So in this video, I really want to share my experiences using this camera, show you some sample pictures that I've taken with it, give you my thoughts, show you how the camera works, show you all the features of it. And at the end of this video, I'll also answer all the questions that I've gotten on my TikTok video that I made because there are so many comments that have been repeated in questions, and I really wanted to show you guys how the camera works and everything like that. But yeah, I just want to give my full thoughts on this camera because I think it's really great and it's a really great product and it's cheap, it's easy, and it got me into film. So without further ado, let's talk about it. So if we take a look on Lomography's website, which I have pulled up right here, it says that it's a simple use, reloadable film camera that is fuss-free, functional, reusable, and a simple use camera. And honestly, simple use is a really great way to describe this because this camera is so easy to use. As I described earlier to you, it is almost built like a disposable and looks like one. It's light, it's plastic, it's cheap. I mean, I have not broken this thing and I throw this thing around a lot. And I mean, there's not really much to it. It's really simple. There's not a lot of functions on here that you can kind of get wrong. It's fully automatic, it's a point and shoot, and it's really fun to use. So before I start talking about why I love it and everything, let's quickly go over the camera and the functions that it has. The camera, as you can see, fits directly in my palm. It's really easy to carry, it's very small. I'll measure it and put the dimensions up on the screen here, but it's very small. Imagine holding a disposable, that's how big this camera is. As I said earlier, there's not a lot of additive features on here to really talk about. Similar to disposable, disposables only have a little wind lever and a little shutter button. There's really not much else to do there, besides also a flash as well. So this camera comes with all of that. It obviously has the shutter button, which is on the top of the camera here. On the side, as I was saying earlier, that's a little latch that you pull down, and then you can open the back and reload and unload the film. On the front here, you'll see that it says Simple Use by Lomography. This is a little sticker I added. It says that this one is loaded with color negative film by Lomography. And on the front, as you can see here, it has a little flash button. But the one thing that's really different about this camera that you probably have not seen on other ones are these little gels in the front here with this little caption that says Mix at Will. So these little gels are really fun, and it's something that I've never seen on camera before, and Lomography as a company is always innovating and making cool stuff, and honestly, this is super cool. So essentially, these are little color gels that go over the flash, that when you take a photo with the flash on, it will emit a colored light based on whatever gel you put. So imagine you take a picture of your friend. If you were to put this magenta one on the front like this, if I were to take a photo with the flash on of my friend, they would be cast in a sort of magenta-ish light, which is really cool and gives a lot of opportunity and room for creative expression, especially something that I wouldn't expect with a disposable type camera. So the back of the camera here, it has a nice little diagram that shows you different combinations of colors you can make with it, along with a little kind of instruction thing on the back. And it shows you some different colors that you can make and different things that you can do with the camera. Now, besides those cool color gels, there's not really anything else on here that makes it any different than a disposable camera. There's also a little plastic viewfinder in the front that lies almost directly on top of the lens. As I said before, there's little instructions on the back about the gels and some things about how to unload it and everything and when to use the flash. The only other thing that was on here besides is a little battery compartment. There's usually a door on here, but I took that off to show you where the battery goes. And one thing that it has that obviously disposables don't have is this little rewind lever. So if I'm just to pull this up right here, you see it kind of comes out. And then here I can wind this, and here I can wind this, and this is how I rewind the film. Now this is something that obviously disposables don't come with because disposables aren't meant to be, reloaded and unloaded. And usually this is something that only comes on, more serious film cameras like a rangefinder and SLR, it's usually on the top here, and this is how you would rewind the film, or you can pull it up, and that's usually how you open the back. So with this camera, it also has one of these, except it's on the bottom of the camera instead of the top. So as you guys can tell, this is a pretty stress-free camera. I showed you all the features on it, and there's not that many. All you can really do on here is wind, shoot, maybe put the flash if you want, put those color gels if you feel like it, but besides that, the camera is fully automatic in terms of exposing and focusing, and there's really not much else you can control. So now let's talk a little bit about the technical specs of this camera and what I learned after using it for a year. So with this camera, and the same applies for disposables and most cheap point shoots, it's really important that you think about how much light is in your setting before you decide to use the flash or not. When you're outside and there's a lot of light available, like the sunlight, it's a bright sunny day, you don't have to use the flash, obviously. The camera will probably get a pretty nice exposure. But as soon as you're inside or in a more dimly lit condition, I realized that it's really important to use the flash. If you look at this picture here on the screen, this is a photo that I took inside of a restaurant. It wasn't dark by any means and the lights were on, it was just more dimly lit. And at the time I didn't realize that I had to use the flash because the camera wasn't going to be able to get a good exposure of it. As you can see, everything is mostly underexposed. You can't really see anybody. There's like 8 people in this photo and you can't see any of them. That's because I made the mistake of not using the flash. But why do you need to use the flash when you're indoors? The reason this happens with this camera specifically is because this camera has a set aperture and a set shutter speed. So the aperture is how open or close your lens is of the camera. The aperture that's set for this camera is f9. Now f9 isn't too wide open or too closed, meaning it's kind of in the middle between being wide open, letting a lot of light, and being really closed and letting in not a lot of light. So it's kind of in the middle there. For shutter speed, this camera has a shutter speed of 1/120th of a second, which isn't really fast or really slow. Both of these speeds and numbers are pretty much in the middle. This means that in settings where there's sufficient light, it's going to be able to do its job and get a nice exposure because it's not too open or closed, and it's not going or opening too close or too quickly. Because the aperture of the camera is f9 and it's still in the middle, it's not that wide open to be able to receive a lot of light. That's why as soon as you're indoors in a dimly lit condition, you should use the flash so you're able to provide your subject and your setting with enough light to take a photo of it. That's just a good general rule to follow. As soon as you're indoors in a dimly lit condition, you're not outside, I would use the flash. But it's all up to you and you'll learn as you use the camera. I found that the pictures come out the most crisp and the most in focus when you're using the flash. When you're not using the flash, the pictures tend to be, I think, a little bit softer, but when you're using the flash and you have that harsh light kind of hitting your subject, I think that makes it easier for the camera to get a nice, kind of more crisp image, but it's not a big difference. I'll show some photos here so you can look. The lens of this camera is also 30mm as described by the website, and that's basically a little bit more farther back than the normal field of view. Usually 50mm is the focal length at which people say that's the closest to what the human eye sees, so 30mm is a little bit farther back than what the human eye would see. Also, this camera, as described by the website, has a fixed focus. A fixed focus lens attempts to get everything in the picture in focus. So if you try to take a portrait of somebody, don't expect some, very crisp focusing on them and then, a blurry background in the back. This obviously is a cheap camera. It's not able to do crazy, innovative things, but it does its job. And for the most part, most pictures I've taken with this have all come in pretty nice focus. So those are some of the technical specs of this camera and some things that I've learned while using it. Just overall, use a flash if you're inside or you're indoors, and if you want a crisp focus, I would recommend using the flash. As soon as you're outdoors and you have ambient light and you have enough light to you think you're getting good exposure, you don't have to use the flash. Just wind it and shoot, and the camera will do everything for you. You don't have to think too hard about it. During the year in which I used this camera, I didn't think that this would become the only camera that I'd be using during the year that I was living in Italy in a different country. During that year, I was thinking of getting into film, and I wanted to buy something like this, like an SLR or maybe a point shoot, and I really wanted to get started with film, but I wasn't really sure where to start, and I was still trying to decide. During that deciding period, I found this camera, which seemed like a really fun way to start shooting film without making a decision on what camera I wanted to get yet. While I thought I was just going to use this a couple of times and not really use it again, it became my primary source of shooting film and just shooting photos because of how easy it was to use and the really nice photos that I was getting out of it. This camera was so easy to carry, and I would just put it in my pocket, and I took it with me hiking when I went Cinque Terre, as you see in these pictures here. I even took it with me when I went swimming. I didn't put it in the water or anything, and actually this camera doesn't work anymore because I dropped it in the ocean, but Lomography has made a nice case that they just came out with that's waterproof, so you can always get one of those if you want to do some underwater shooting. What I'm trying to say here is I really took it with me everywhere. It didn't matter where, it was probably in my pocket or my bag, and it fit perfectly, and it was so easy to use, and if I ever were to lose it, I wouldn't be too worried. Obviously I'd be worried about the film that I lost, but this camera's only like $15 and I could always buy another one. But in general, it's really nice. So now that we've talked a little bit about the camera and how it works, I think it's time we look at some of the images that I've taken with this to show you guys what kind of images this camera is capable of taking. The camera obviously only has a cheap plastic lens, so that means that the photos are going to be pretty soft like most disposable photos, but honestly, I've been really surprised with some of the really nice images that I've gotten out of this camera, and I didn't expect it. I mean, it's a little cheap camera, didn't really expect much from it, but I've gotten some of my favorite photos on this, and I want to show you some of the ones that I've taken. So let's take a look. Now, if you look on the website here, which I'll put on the screen, you'll see that there are 3 different versions of this camera. There's a black one, a blue one like the one I'm holding here, and a purple one. This is one of the most asked questions I got in my TikTok video, asking what the difference was between these cameras and the different colors of them. But the only difference that the color makes on the camera is it indicates what film it's preloaded with. So the company Lomography, besides making really cool cameras, also makes a lot of experimental or creative films. So the different colored cameras indicate which Lomography film it comes preloaded with. The blue one that I'm holding here comes preloaded with their standard color negative 400 ISO film. The black and white one comes preloaded with their standard black and white 400 ISO film. And the purple one comes with their more experimental / creative film, Lomochrome Purple, also a 400 ISO film. The cheapest one of the bunch is the black and white one, which comes at $18. This one here is $21, and the purple one is $23. It really doesn't matter which one you buy, it just depends on which film you want to come preloaded with. Now, regardless of the film that this comes preloaded with, this doesn't hinder or, alter what sort of film you can reload it with in the future. If I buy the color one, I can reload it with black and white if I want. If I were to buy the black and white one, I can reload it with color. It really doesn't matter. You also aren't limited to just Lomography films. You could load this camera with whatever film you want. You could use an Ilford film, Kodak film, a Fuji film. It really doesn't matter. You can reload it with whatever you want. Now, since these cameras come preloaded with 400 ISO film, I think I would recommend also reloading it with a 400 ISO film. I'm sure you could get it to work with other ISOs, but I've never tried it with different ones, so I personally would recommend doing 400. But if you guys have tried different ISOs and it's worked, let me know in the comments. While I have a bunch of other point and shoots that are a little bit more complicated and have added features like a self-timer, an ISO selector, and a little mirror selfie thing, these are really fun to use as well, but sometimes they're just too heavy and I don't really want to carry them. If you look at a size comparison here, this is the Lomography camera and this is just a point and shoot that I got at a thrift store. As you can see, they're not that much different, but they're, just different enough that the Lomography is a bit smaller. Oops. While it's smaller in size, it's also smaller in weight. This thing is really not heavy at all. The only thing that makes this heavy is the battery in the bottom, and if I were to take that out, this thing is like air. This is a completely plastic shell that weighs nothing. So that's one of the main reasons I love using this. I can put this in my pocket, I can just carry it around in my hand, and while I thought that not having a strap on this like one of these cameras where I can just, put this over my head and carry it around my neck like this, while I thought I would miss having that on here, I honestly didn't. This is small enough that I can carry it in a little bag, and though I don't carry bags often, I can also just put this in my pocket. It's something that I don't have to think too hard about. I don't have to worry about the strap getting everywhere, and honestly, I think it makes it easier to shoot. I can just stress-free go around, take a photo. Alright, so now let's talk about how to load this camera. If you've ever used a regular 35mm film camera before and you've loaded and unloaded it, this is almost going to be the opposite of that process. Now, if you ever use a disposable camera, you'll notice that the counter on the top doesn't tell you how many photos you've taken in terms of going from 1, 2, 3. If you've taken 3 photos, the counter isn't going to read 3. Instead, it's going to count down from the number of photos that you have. Let's say your roll has 24 photos on it and you've taken 2 photos. Your counter would then say 22, and it counts all the way down to empty. And that's how disposable works, and that's how this camera works as well. With most regular 35mm film cameras, it does the opposite. Instead of telling you how many you have left, it tells you how many you've taken. If you've taken 2 photos, it's going to read 2, and it's going to go all the way up until you reach 24, 36, or however many exposures you have on your camera.
Now the reason this is because with the disposable cameras and also this, it's going to be loaded almost kind of backwards to the way you load this type of camera. So let me show you why. On this camera, on most regular 35mm film cameras, the film usually gets loaded into the left and feeds this way. Now the main difference between these two is that with a regular 35mm film camera, the film gets wound over here, and once you have a little bit already wound around the spool, you can close the camera. With every photo that you take, and every time you advance the film gets moved forward this way, and eventually once you've taken all your photos, your film is going to be wound around this tight little spool, right? And then once you've done with all the photos, you have to rewind the film from this side back into the canister, and that's how it usually works, right? Well, with this camera, it's the opposite. Before you actually take your photos, you're going to wind all of the film over here into the take-up spool before you take the photos. That way, when you wind the winder this way, the film is going to load back into the canister. That way, when you're all done with the photos, you don't have to rewind anything. The film is already going to be back in here, and you can just take it out. So that's why it's a little bit opposite. So now let's talk about how to load the camera. My camera's actually broken, so I'm not going to load any new film into here. I have some old canisters, and then I also have some old film I'm going to use to demonstrate, but keep in mind that you're obviously going to be using new film, not what I'm doing. Now, as I said earlier, once you've taken all your photos and you've reached the end of your film and it says empty, you can open the back of your camera and take the film out. It's already back in your canister. You don't have to worry about rewinding it. To open the back of the camera, you look on the right here, this little latch, and you can pull down on it, or push down, I guess, and then open the back, and you can take your film out. Once again, I'm demonstrating on some used film, but when you're going to be using your film, this is what it's going to look like. Obviously, your film is going to be wound in its canister, and it's going to have a little bit poking out of it. What you're going to do, first of all, is you're going to take your film, and you're going to be placing it right side up. With other 35mm film cameras, you would place it upside down, but in this camera, you're going to place it right side up, so that this little thing right here, this little top kind of thing poking out, is going to fit right into here, okay? So we're going to put it in, kind of lock it into place, and make sure the bottom is flat right there. Now for this part, I'm going to take this out and demonstrate with some used film because I don't want to actually pull this out. So once you have it here, you're going to have your little film poking out, and here's what you're going to do next. So once again, I'm only doing this because I don't want to use any real film because my camera's broken. So now let me show you on a test roll of film that I have. So let's just imagine you have your film in your canister, nothing has changed, imagine your film canister's here. What you're going to do next is you're going to want to pull your film over to this side. Now before you start, you need to turn this little spool here and wait till you see one of these little teeth. Kind of like a little bump in the spool. Now as you can see here, this little bump is almost the same size as these little holes in the film. Now, that is not a coincidence. Basically, you're going to pull this film forward, and you want at least one of those holes to latch onto this little tooth here. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to hold your film canister down with your thumb and pull the film forward, okay? Once you pull the film forward, and you put it over here, you're going to want it to catch onto one of these teeth. See how it's caught on right there? So once it's caught on, you're going to hold it tight. You're going to take the film winder out from the bottom, and you're going to wind it counterclockwise. Okay, see now it's not working because I haven't loaded it correctly. Wait, so keep going. And then you'll see that the film starts to move. It moves once it's caught on to the little tooth there. If it doesn't move, it's because it hasn't caught on. So load it a little bit, like that. And then once you've loaded a little bit and you can tell that it's caught on, it's going to keep loading, you can close your camera. The reason we do this is because film is light sensitive, and you don't want to do this with the film just open to light. So now what we're going to do is you're going to want to hold the rewind lever, which is right here. Okay, you're going to hold that down, and now you're going to keep turning it to the left. And you should hear this sound. This little clicking sound. You're going to keep going until it kind of becomes tight and it won't let you go anymore and it stops clicking. Once you've done that, all of your film is now loaded onto this side and it's ready to be taken pictures with. That means that every time now that you advance your film and you take a photo, the film is going to move over here back into its canister. Obviously, once again, mine is broken, so it's not actually going to do that. But once you've done that and you've taken all your pictures and your counter reads E, you should be able to open it. And that's basically it. That's how you load this camera.
This is a camera that I use a lot for just capturing memories. Whether it's with my friends and family, this is something that I carry around with me solely for the purpose of just documenting my life and capturing things that I would have missed if I were using a more complicated camera like this that I have to, dial in the settings, think about focus. This really just does it all for me. Whatever you use a disposable for, I guarantee you can use the same thing and with more features, especially with this little color gel thing. I think that's a really great feature, especially when you're making photos of your friends. And, I think this is a really great thing you could use at parties as well. And that's the Lomography Simple Use camera. I hope that this video was helpful and informative and you guys enjoyed it. If you have any more questions about this camera or anything else that I talked about in here, please leave them below and I'll be sure to answer them. And if you have any video ideas that you'd like to see on this channel, please let me know. I'm going to attempt to upload another video next week, and I'll try to do weekly uploads, but if I don't, please don't murder me. If you want to catch me between uploads, I usually upload a lot of stuff on Instagram and TikTok. On Instagram is where I have all my photo work. I also do Q&As and live streams with you guys, and it's where I answer the most DMs and interact with you guys the most. On TikTok is where I post like little short either tutorials or little tips about film and photography. And if you follow me there, you can also keep up with some more little tips and tricks about photography. But anyway, that's the Lomography Simple Use camera. I love this camera, and it'll always hold a very sentimental place in my heart for the memories that it helped me capture and how it kind of got me started into loving film. So I always really like this camera. Anyway, that's Lomography Simple Use. If you want to buy it, there's links in the description where you can get it if you'd like. And at Lomography, if you're watching this, sponsor me. Alright, well, I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.